Hello, my name is Julia Streets and welcome to DiverCity Podcast, talking about diversity and inclusion in financial services. We've taken a break from our usual schedule to curate and create a mini-series designed to help our listeners during these challenging times. And where better to look than to some of our previous guests, experts in their own fields. You may remember our guest Andy Gibson, Head Gardener of MindApples, from a previous episode where we talked about cognitive diversity and mental health. And Andy, welcome back. It's wonderful to speak to you today. We're having a chat over Zoom, so thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me back.
Wonderful. So on the podcast, we talk about the future of work and we consider the role of flexible working models and also talking about the importance of managing employee mental health. And of course, right now, we face a reality to some degree planned, to some degree imposed, where all three combine. And I just want to mention that aside from the podcast, I'm also the founder and CEO of a business development marketing communications consultancy called Streets Consulting. 13 years ago, when I set up the business, I did it as an entirely virtual business model. So all our consultants work from home. And one of the areas where I pay most attention generally, but most particularly now, more than ever before, is on the topic of mental health. So, Andy, many managers will be managing remote teams for the first time, and I'd love to really explore with you what people should be thinking about. So why don't we start with, tell us what you're focused on at MindApples, and for the benefit of the audience, just remind us what MindApples does.
Thanks, Julia. Yes, it's quite a busy time for us, as you can imagine. I think for a lot of us, we're just sort of running at full pelt, but particularly so because what MindApples does, we are at our core a public health organisation, and so we have two sides to our business. We're a social business which does charitable and commercial work, and my time has been divided really between the two sides, trying to, on the commercial side, be of use to our clients, and of course to try and make sure that my team are safe and that we're still able to operate. And so we've been doing a lot of work reaching out to clients and just trying to make useful offers and providing webinars mainly because a lot of people have been sent home and we're sort of trying to keep everybody connected. And so we've been doing a lot of webinar programs on productivity and resilience and changing habits, those kinds of themes. But then on the charitable side, trying to think how can we be of use in this time of crisis, because we don't want to be a health organisation that just sits on our hands or worries about ourselves. We're supposed to be outward facing and looking at how we can support people. And it's a particular challenge for us because a lot of the charitable work we've done in the last year has been on schools. And of course, now that schools are closed, we're trying to figure out how we can still support teachers, parents, children who haven't got that support structure, which is quite difficult, and also talking to a lot of people, particularly in London, about how we can support frontline health workers. And so there's a lot going on, but I suppose we've been finding it's quite good to be feeling like working in public mental health, trying to help everybody to manage their minds, trying to increase our knowledge and awareness about how we can maintain good health and well-being in the population. It feels very relevant. It feels like we've got into the things that are useful and we have something to offer, which has been very good for my mind over the last couple of weeks.
And I think contributions like that are more welcome really than ever before, because when you think about it, there's a normal working state, but we're all watching the news, we're all hearing the updates. Our home working lives have shifted. I've done more conference calls recently with, technologists with children on their knees, for example, clients with children running around, and actually that's created additional pressure that reveals itself in different ways, whether that's anxiety or stress, or actually some people who thrive in those environments as well. But so let's start with, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the advice you'd give to individuals to manage their sort of emotional and day-to-day reactions to what's happening in these current times.
Yeah, it's obviously different pressures for different people. So it's going to be quite personal to everybody. Some of our clients are just trying to figure out how to support their workforce with working from home. Others are not sure if they're going to be able to keep trading. So it's a pretty mixed bag. And so I think to give some general thoughts on what we can do to manage our minds in the face of all this, I suppose one thing to bear in mind is that a lot of us are feeling quite afraid at the moment. And my feeling on fear is that it is actually intended to be helpful. So that fear loop is designed to keep us safe. And a lot of the time we talk about it as if it's getting in the way because life isn't generally very dangerous in the Western developed world, at least. But at the moment, we do actually have some things that are legitimately frightening for us. And so a lot of it's about trying to identify when that fear response is helping. I've certainly found that alertness, that feeling of attention to what might possibly be going wrong in the future, trying to get ahead of the curve, anticipate what might be happening, is really useful. The trick is to try and distinguish when the fear is actionable, when you're able to do something on the basis of it, or if it's simply adding to the feeling of powerlessness. And so a lot of the things I've been putting my attention on have helped me. I've certainly found that so over the last 10 days, I've been experiencing, my wife and I both have been experiencing something that we think is probably the virus, but obviously we don't know. And it's been helpful to look at symptoms and look at following it all through and know how I can look after myself. But then there were points where I found myself just looking at stories of people who are very ill and feeling powerless and feeling afraid. And so it's about noticing when that fear response is kicking in and becoming destructive rather than when it's being helpful. So that would be one thing I'd say. A second thing is to know the relationship between your thoughts and your feelings, to notice that. There's nothing particularly wrong with feeling bad, feeling fearful, feeling angry. It's simply that what it's doing is filtering your attention to notice problems and threats, things that you need to do something about, which is really useful, but it's worth just remembering that positive states of mind help you to notice possibilities, opportunities, things to explore. And so if you spend a lot of time in that state of feeling fearful, feeling threatened, feeling stressed, then it can make the whole world seem threatening and stressful. And it can be quite good to just notice where there are feedback loops coming in, if your emotional state is affecting your perception, filtering the world so that you're missing things, I suppose. And that's a kind of good point to notice, is when there's that looping effect. So for me, it's a bit about trying to acknowledge that I'm afraid and that I'm angry about things and that I have good days and bad days, and to just bear in mind that what my mind is noticing is not the full picture, and that I can't completely trust everything that I think. And that distancing can be really helpful for just getting a bit of a gap. I suppose my third piece of advice is that a lot of what's helped me is focusing on what I can do rather than what I can't. And when we get stressed particularly, or start to panic, we get blinded to our resources, our assets, the people who might help us, the skills that we have to call on, and that can make problems feel even more unmanageable. And so that spiraling effect of forgetting our resources, missing out on things that might actually be good solutions, can make things even worse. And I found it very helpful to try and look outward and say, okay, never mind whether I'm okay right now, what can I do that is of use? What skills do I have? What assets could I call on? How can I be of service to other people? And that's partly just a good thing for us all to do at the moment, but it's also, I found, a very good way of reorientating my mental focus onto assets and possibilities rather than just looking at threats all the time, because otherwise I think I would have been, and have been at various points, felt quite overwhelmed by it all. But it'll be different for everyone. I offer those three things to think about, but if you find yourself worrying about whether you're doing all those three things, then that will just add to your worries. So also be kind to yourself.
And of course, there's an interesting reality. Some people are involved deeply in familial circumstances. So all of a sudden they're operating with many people around them. And some people are on their own, without necessarily their loved ones by their side, doing everything across remote platforms as well. Interested in your thoughts, particularly for those who are on their own. Is any particular recommendations you'd make to them about how to be very mindful of those three key points you were talking about, fear and the relationship to thoughts and feelings, and then also focusing on what you can do.
Yeah, it's certainly isolation is a theme coming up. It's completely different, as you say, for different people. Some people are finding they're overstimulated, they're bombarded by too many people, either at home or virtually, and others are kind of grateful for the connection. And I think part of it is about realizing that we don't necessarily need people physically with us all the time. It's about knowing that they're there and connected and care. So finding ways to just remind yourself that there are people who care, that there are people that you care about. Just any kind of distant connections can still be really helpful. And quite a good example of how that seems to work is that there's been a lot of talk for years about whether the internet is disconnecting us, whether it's getting in the way of our relationships, our spending time with each other. And of course, there are elements of that. But the recent UK Attitude Survey found that people with the internet seem to feel a lot less isolated and lonely than people without the internet. So it's even just being able to see stories online, follow forums, Twitter, hear people talking, that feeling of being part of a wider community, a wider tribe can be really, really helpful. The thing that's very difficult is, of course, I don't know whether people are isolated because they just can't physically get to people, or whether they're feeling generally like no one is checking on them, and that can be a lot harder. But I definitely think that feeling of a higher cause, a broader community, seems to be really helpful for people, that it's not necessarily always just about, a one-to-one connection, but that feeling of belonging, that feeling that we're all in this together. And from that perspective, I find the internet really helpful to that feeling. A lot of the people, particularly that I follow on Twitter, are sharing really useful information, trying to be helpful. I've got a lot of WhatsApp groups and chat groups going on with people who are trying to share resources, trying to solve problems for each other. And so anything you can do to get involved in a wider community. I would say, though, that there's nothing wrong with wanting to be on your own. And actually sometimes being able to say, I'm going to use this opportunity to just, think about what I want, to do things that I feel are me, and to resist the feeling that you're missing out just because you're not constantly logged on to a Zoom call with everybody. And although there's a lot of studies that suggest that loneliness and isolation are very bad for us. In fact, there are studies that link loneliness to similar kind of health problems to smoking, obesity, and alcoholism. It really seems that we need people around us. There was a study that suggested one of the counters to that is you can dilute some of those effects of feeling a bit lonely and isolated if you live in a way that's really true to your values, to the things that you like and enjoy. So a lot of it is about going in, we're trying to figure out, what do you want to do? If there's no one around, then what can you do that you couldn't do before? But it's not necessarily going to be easy for us to suddenly flip into this mode. It's going to take some adjustment. So again, I'd say if you feel like you're struggling with it, then don't worry. A lot of it's just our minds and our routines catching up with the new reality and trying to figure out what does make us feel happy, what does allow us to feel resilient to keep going. And we're not going to have it all figured out on day one.
And from a leadership perspective, one of the things I think about at the moment I'm particularly active in is the point you made actually within that was about the importance of having people checking in. And I've been talking to my team. One of the best practices of managing remote teams is actually the importance of checking in with people, as indeed you would do in an office environment as well, but particularly remotely, which is having a culture of checking in on each other and then also communicating probably more than you naturally would do. So as a leader of a business, I've been very actively checking in with people and being very mindful, actually, which is interesting what you just said there about behaviors, is about different people's personality types and observing how personality types adapt and change under certain circumstances. For example, now under increased stress as well. Let's turn the conversation to, as leaders of businesses now running remote teams, having probably never done that before. Love to hear your thoughts and advice on what they should be paying attention to.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? This idea of different personalities responding in different ways. I think that my wife joked last week that the introverts will all live. This is how it will divide now. The people who are good at staying in are now the model for everyone. I think there's something interesting in how to manage diverse groups of different personalities when you can't see people, because I think a lot of this stuff is instinctive, and many leaders that I know are instinctively just naturally quite good at these things and haven't necessarily unpicked it and thought, how am I doing that, and how can I do that over a different form? And one of the big problems we have is that it's not that communication is 95% non-verbal. That's kind of, there's various stats that get thrown around like that. Actually, it's more about emotion that is non-verbal. The experiments, that dates back to Albert Mehrabian's experiments in the 1970s, and they weren't looking at communication; they were looking at emotional transference. And what they found is that actually how you feel about someone and how you assess how you think they're feeling, whether you believe them, seems to be only about 7% down to the words, and the rest is tone of voice and body language, non-verbal cues. So that gets stripped away when you're just looking at emails or text messages, and we need to almost artificially fill in the blanks. So it can lead to some quite clumsy conversations where people are trying to express emotion or inquire about people's emotional states, but we haven't quite got the language for it. But the intention's good because it's trying to fill that gap that would otherwise be done by smiling at each other or saying hi, or even, dare I say, handshakes. Remember those? And so I think a couple of things I'd say about just like trying to manage teams. One thing is that what I've been noticing is a desire to communicate for fear that if people are left to their own devices, that they'll just sort of crumble. And it's not necessarily the case that people need constantly, checking in, talking, reminding of things. I think a lot of the time what people need is clarity about what they need to do and when the next check-in is, and then to feel okay about disconnecting and getting on with things. And I've sensed a lot of fatigue over the last week or two, partly due to people building new habits. It obviously is tiring to reorientate your whole routine, but a lot of it is just people feeling always on. The number of people who feel like they're just not simply working at home, but having to constantly stare at their computer, make sure they don't miss a message, be on video all the time. It's very full on, because it requires conscious attention to do that. It's not that we just have the video on in the background and everybody's just working around it. So I think a lot of it is about asynchronous communication. If you're checking in with people, do it via WhatsApp, via messages, via Yammer, whatever tools you've got. And don't be worried if someone doesn't respond immediately, because we're in danger of creating a culture which is like email culture, but squared, where everybody is sending messages and waiting to see whether someone replies within 10 seconds. And so we're constantly all wired into the network. And actually, a lot of it's about being able to say, I'm going dark for a few hours. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. So I think a lot of this is like the opportunity. The thing I like about working from home, which I've done a lot, is that I can do deep, focused work. I can concentrate on things immersively for a few hours and then resurface and start doing emails or attending to things. And so having some kind of sensitivity to, how do you check in with people in a way that doesn't interrupt their focus or demand that they're paying attention to the organization rather than what they're supposed to be doing. That would be my sort of first instinct about it at the moment as I see the culture evolving.
And it seems like that completely chimes with the feedback I've been having from talking to many people over the last sort of week, 10 days, which is people being bombarded from multiple channels. It's like it's sort of increased almost more. And just trying to help people carve out, I'm just repeating and echoing completely what you said about how to manage that process as well. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you're spending time with employees, that some people are naturally happy working remotely and others simply struggle. And, I'm not a perfect leader. And if I reflect on the 13 years of running my company, we haven't always got that right. And one thing that really struck me particularly recently is the journey between somebody really doing very well and actually struggling to perform is remarkably short. And we've had a couple of people who have just said, actually, this isn't the environment for me. It's not the structure for me. And surprised as I am that anybody would not want to work at Streets Consulting, it is obviously the right decision. But that's something that I'm particularly paying attention to. And the big question I'm asking my team at the moment, how will I know if you're not doing well? Because I get it. right, I'm the boss. You won't want to talk to me about everything, but how will I know if you're not doing well? And to have that kind of open conversation between me and the team that says, you now know, I need to know. And I'm very intrigued to hear your response, which is yours to give and mine to take away. But once we've done that, we've essentially sort of engaged in a very open contract, if you like, which is it needs to be flagged. You now know it needs to be flagged to me, however you prefer to do that. And what I found is actually that the response to that has been incredibly warming and encouraging, and it's kind of made people feel, I believe, that actually somebody's really paying attention to how they're doing. Love to get your response to that, because I may be doing the wrong thing, and also thoughts on other key questions or other things we should be particularly thinking about right now that we might not necessarily have done before.
Yeah, I certainly don't think you're doing the wrong thing. Don't worry. And it wouldn't be for me to say so anyway, because I think it is about relationship. Most of the kind of what we know about management is it's not a simple kind of one size fits all. It's about whether there's a good fit between the leader and their team. And so a lot of this is about, people self-selecting in and out of roles and types of working that work for them. And that's okay. A lot of it, I think, is about trying to pick apart the things that are, the ways we work because that's what the business needs versus the ways we work because that's what I as a leader instinctively end up wanting to do. And so trying to decide that we're doing things in the culture because it helps the work rather than because everybody needs to be of the same mind or the same personality. So there are studies, for example, that suggest introverted leaders lead introverted teams well and vice versa. And so actually, if you've got somebody who's very extroverted and they're managing a team of people who are quite introverted, it doesn't work. But it's not that there's anything wrong with that leadership style. It's just about how do you tailor it to suit the range of people that are working with you. And we talked a lot last time I was on the show about neurodiversity, and a lot of it's about that sensitivity to trying to figure out how as a leader you can work in a way that suits the individuals in your team, which may be different for each person. It may be that what your job is to remember, that person doesn't like constantly being on video, that person prefers, a bit more detail, that person likes to be praised, that person just likes to know they've got a target to hit. It's that stuff is the work, I think. But a lot of what I think you're describing, I would call it psychological safety. And it's a theme that we push a lot when we do work with organizations to encourage and challenge managers to try and figure out how to make everybody feel safe to feel however they want to feel and to express what they really think, which is important for a number of things. Partly it helps very much with identifying if people are struggling and getting support early. It also helps with things like creativity, because if people feel free to share what they really think, you get a more wide-ranging and diverse set of ideas, and lots of studies on the benefits of diversity and sort of multifunctional teams, people with different backgrounds, qualifications for boosting creative thinking. Actually, you can only really harness the benefits of that diversity if you create a culture where it's okay to be different, where it's actually seen as a benefit that people have got different views to bring and different ideas. So I would say keep doing that, but also try and figure out what else you can do to make people feel okay to share what's really on their minds and talk about what's going on for them. Recognizing that people may not want to, that's part of safety as well, is don't pry. You don't need to know whether people are feeling miserable today. You just need to know whether it's going to affect their, things they have to do, their welfare. But I think a lot of it is about trying to figure out what you can do to help people feel that they can bring the whole of their mind to work. And I think a lot of that rapid spiraling often comes from people feeling not only that they're not happy, but that it's not okay to feel unhappy. And so therefore they shouldn't be in the community or the organization, that they have to take themselves out, when in fact it might be fine for them to be unhappy. Maybe other people are unhappy, and them talking to you about it might mean you could improve the way that the organization works.
And of course, from a leadership perspective as well, which is if you talk to me about it, there are things I can invariably do to help.
Yeah.
There are adjustments that can be made, there are conversations that can be had, there are structures that can be put in place. So it is important to do that. But while you were talking, kind of an expression just comes to mind, but it's easily bandied around, about emotional intelligence and emotional or EQ and empathetic leadership. Is that essentially what you're driving at in terms of leadership qualities and muscles that need to be flexed now more than ever before?
Yeah, it's interesting. These different terms that become popular at different times. So staff engagement's had sort of its time in the sun, and well-being has its go as well. And emotional intelligence is a classic one of that. And we certainly talk about emotional intelligence in all of our training, and it's a useful kind of route in, I think, for a lot of people into this. I suppose a couple of things I'd say about this. One thing is that sort of technical terminology that can be quite helpful is the distinction between empathizing and mentalizing. That empathizing with people is feeling a connection to their experiences, sensing what it might be like for, to be in their shoes, but it doesn't necessarily explain their feelings. So feeling sad because someone is sad does not necessarily give you insight into why they're sad. So little kids are quite empathetic. They get sad when you feel sad, but they have no idea why. They get excited because you're excited, but they don't know what they're excited about. And then over the years, we learn to mentalize, which is to accurately interpret what's going through someone's mind and relate that to their behavior. And that's probably closer to what we think of as emotional intelligence. And the term I often use for it is not so much intelligence, because people sometimes think it means a kind of innate brain power. But emotional literacy, I find quite a helpful term for it, because it's a bit like learning to read. It's about getting better at understanding why you do things, why the things that pass through your mind are there, and how to make sense of them. And then from that, to be able to get a bit of better sense of why someone might be reacting the way that they are, to try and understand the variances in people's responses and interests and sensitivities. And it's all slightly guesswork. It is about trying to fill in blanks and read between the lines. So you have to hold it lightly and be prepared to be wrong. But certainly, I think as we get better at being leaders, and generally as people, and spend more time in relationships, we start to learn, okay, that person's angry with me, but it's not me. It's because of the call they were just on, and I just need to let them calm down. And this person is actually upset because I've done something wrong and I need to adjust my behavior. And that can help to separate the noise from the really important signals of what actually needs to be actioned, because otherwise we can end up obsessing about trying to fix things that actually maybe what people needed was just to, have a cup of tea, take a day out, sleep a bit better, and then the problem vanishes. So yeah, I think practicing our skills of mentalization and our emotional literacy is a very good thing to be doing at the moment.
I can't believe how time just disappears. I mean, it's incredible. We've been talking for nearly half an hour about this, and genuinely, I have a million and one other questions that I would love to explore with you as well. I suppose to bring it to a natural conclusion for now, and it won't be the last time we talk about this, I'm sure.
We've got to stay connected. You see, everyone must constantly be connecting.
Well, it's interesting because when you started out, you were talking about how you're giving away to other people, right? So you've actually it's the outreach of saying, what can I do for you? And what can I do for others? And then putting others before you, which I'm hearing more and more is of course one of the wonderful things that's happening at the moment. Love to, just to wrap us up at the end of the show, just your thoughts on positive behaviors and positive activities that give you great hope for optimism.
Yeah, it's certainly been an interesting moment for seeing who steps up. We're already seeing online, particularly the stories emerging of employers that have responded by being generous and helpful and offering discounts to NHS workers and keeping all their staff safe, and versus other employers who shall remain nameless, who may not have perhaps risen to the challenge as much. And so I think a lot of this is about noticing how many of these stories there are of people who, of their own free will, have said, well, actually, I want to try and do the right thing. I want to try and keep people on payrolls. I want to try and, keep paying subcontractors, which of course I think is very important at the moment, because we're still not, quite sure if this is all going to be, the support will be evenly distributed. So anything that people can do to keep those lines flowing seems to be very, very helpful. And also I think the internet is a very interesting beast at the moment, because it gets a bit of a bad rep. And a lot of time people are saying that this sort of the Twitter feedback loop and the kind of the hysteria on social media is causing a lot of problems. But it depends where you look. And what I've found actually has been that the internet has been an incredibly useful source of knowledge, of fact checking, of support, of stories, of people trying to encourage the positive behaviors that they want to see. And this is the first time we've faced a global pandemic whilst having really good internet connectivity. Of course, it's not everywhere, but certainly amongst the countries that are most affected at the moment, we have a lot more connectivity and the capacity of research teams to share data. There are volunteering projects popping up of people with scientific skills taking on tasks for researchers who are working on vaccines and drug treatments, the speed with which possible options are being shared. There's an open source ventilator project that's coming in Oxford. There's lots of people talking about donating masks. I've been witnessing all kinds of supply chains being set up of people who've got things that are needed, trying to get them to the place that they're useful. And we wouldn't have been able to do that 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So I think what we're witnessing is a very different kind of immune response where, because we are so connected together to share information and emotions as well, that we are as a collective human body responding in a very different way to this threat. And we'll see whether it leads to a radically different way of approaching epidemics or whether it simply just allows us to find that breakthrough that changes everything. But I'm certainly feeling that the people that I'm following, the people that I see and talking to the clients that we have and the charities we're trying to support, there's just millions and millions of really wonderful people all working flat out to try and keep us safe and solve this problem. And it's an amazing time to be alive, though, of course, as the old Chinese curse goes, may you live in interesting times.
What a very positive way to end this episode in our special mini-series. Andy, thank you so much. Head Gardener of MindApples. It's been wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And it's really nice to be here and to also just reiterate what I was saying at the start. If there are any people listening to this who work for large charities, healthcare groups, public service, schools, education, who need help and want to support particularly the health of their staff, the well-being of people that they're working with, then do get in touch, drop us a line through the website mindapples.org, and we will do our very best to try and offer some support in the current crisis.
Andy, thank you.
Thank you so much.
As always, to all our listeners on DiverCity Podcast, thank you for listening.
This episode of DiverCity Podcast was produced by me, Kieran Yates, on behalf of Julia Streets Productions. You can find out more about the guests on this week's show on our website, DiverCityPodcast.com, and that's diversity with a C, not an S. Whilst you're there, you can also sign up to our newsletter for all our latest updates. All our episodes are available in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favourite podcast app. If you enjoy DiverCity Podcast, remember to share on social media and give us a rating or review. It really helps promote the show to a wider audience. Finally, our Twitter handle is @DiverCityPod. Thanks for listening.